Have you ever felt like a magnet for trauma? Like it just keeps happening, or you just keep hanging around the wrong people? There are wolves out there in the world, and predators exist, and they look for easy targets. And sometimes, when someone is socially naive or they desperately want to fit in, that's an easy target. And unfortunately, that is a number of neurodivergent folks. Hi, I'm Dr. James Thatcher. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in Portland, Oregon, and I work at Forest Psychological Clinic. And I've done over 2,000 comprehensive autism and ADHD evaluations. And in this video, I'm going to go over something that I unfortunately see all the time, to where how autism and trauma can reinforce one another and how it can feel like you're in a cycle that you just can't escape. So here's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to talk about how vulnerability and risk to trauma are actually increased or higher in folks who are neurodivergent. Then we're going to talk about how trauma can change a person's self-trust and their nervous system. And then we're going to talk about how misunderstanding from other environments and other people can lock in this trauma. And then finally, at the end, I'll give you a roadmap on how to try and break this cycle. And one thing before I get into this video, I just want to say that trauma can develop in a lot of different ways. I'm going to go over a couple of patterns that I've seen today clinically, but that is not every single story. So some of you have been using the combined word of trauma and autism down in the comments, like traumatism or trautism. So whatever you call it, it's not a diagnosis. It's a shorthand to understand what's going on. This is a real lived experience that I see all of the time. To where autism affects how someone moves through the world. And sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of the time, the world's response to that is painful. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to call it essentially what it is, an autism trauma cycle. So first, let's go over why vulnerability and risk in neurodivergent folks actually goes up. When someone tells me, I feel like I'm a magnet for trauma, I usually hear two different forces at work that's going on. The first one is social communication differences, to where it can make it more difficult to read the social situation in the moment. And a common part of autism is difficulty picking up on the nuance, tone, power dynamics, social cues, the vibe that, hey, this person seems unsafe. And this doesn't mean that folks on the autism spectrum are less intelligent. What it means is that doing that social math in that moment under time pressure is difficult. And then the second force that I see is often a very powerful drive to fit in, and that can override a person's gut feeling. A lot of autistic folks, kids, teens, even adults, desperately want to fit in. Exclusion hurts. But what that means sometimes is that overlook some of the warning signs. So here's an example that I use when I'm working with parents of a kid, to where I'll ask if a friend came up to you, or if a person came up to you and offered like, hey, I'll be your friend for $1, what would they say? And if the parent or the kid says, yeah, I'll give them $1 so I can be their friend, I don't think that they're dumb. Rather, I think there's something else that's going on there, to where that kid might think, oh, they'll be my friend if I do this thing, if I give them $1. So once I give them the dollar, then we'll be friends, right? So where friendship is being offered, I want friendship, I'll do what it takes. And here's another pattern that I see all the time, to where a kid will just have one friend, but that one friend is very controlling. They might tell them, you can't talk to those other kids. I'm your only friend. They might mock them, pressure them to do things that they don't want to do. But what ends up happening is the kid just goes along with it, because the alternative is that they'll be alone, complete social isolation, to where they'll start telling themselves, if I lose this person, I'll have nobody to be with. And the same sort of thing can happen in adulthood, to where adults will tell themselves, if I lose this person, I don't have anybody else. And that's a dangerous place to be. Because like I was saying before, predators can smell that. They pick up on vulnerability and compliance. And if someone has learned over time, I don't get to have my own needs, they're far easier to push. So here's step 2 to that cycle. It's where the trauma layers on. And when that happens, self-trust drops out. So once trauma enters the picture, this cycle gets harder to break because trauma just doesn't add pain. It changes how your nervous system predicts danger. And one of the biggest things that gets damaged in that, and one of the biggest things that can protect us from trauma, is that when trauma enters the picture, your self-trust starts to go down. And people will describe it in all kinds of different ways. They'll say, I had a bad feeling, but then I talked myself out of it. Or that, my stomach said no, but I ignored it. Or they'll talk about how they'll freeze up and then just agree to it, but then later realize that they didn't want to do that. And when self-trust drops, people tend to move in one of two different directions. Direction number 1 is to appease, so they'll over-explain, they'll over-accommodate, try to keep the peace, try to stay more likable to the other person, and try desperately not to lose the relationship. Or sometimes people will move in a different direction to where they'll shut down or they'll avoid. And this is where people learn, their nervous systems learn that people are unsafe, social situations are unsafe, they're dangerous. So then they start to avoid. And this is where things can get kind of messy, not just diagnostically, but with this whole cycle, to where with trauma, it can add to a person's response of becoming irritable, avoiding, shutting down. And that's not because autism suddenly got worse. It's because the nervous system is living closer to that red line. So on the surface, it might look like someone is acting more autistic. But in reality, it's autism and trauma that are interacting with one another. And now the third part of that cycle, how misunderstanding creates an environment for invalidation. And this is where that cycle can become really long term for people. So where the environment is misreading what's happening in the situation. So this is where schools, parents, spouses, even therapists can misinterpret what's going on to where we may think to ourselves or even say out loud, you're being defiant. You're not trying hard enough. You're being dramatic. You're avoiding. But the truth of the matter is much simpler. Capacity's been tapped out, and that person is trying to protect themselves. And when a child grows up in an environment where their needs are constantly being misinterpreted as wrong, that's an invalidating environment. And sometimes they'll get the message of, why are you being so sensitive? Or why can't you be like everybody else? Or even, you're the problem. And what these messages are, isn't one single traumatic event. Rather, it's a slow drip of the message, your wiring is wrong. And that type of chronic invalidation changes a person's nervous system. It teaches people to doubt themselves, to push past their limits, to overlook red flags in dangerous or predatory relationships, or to even tolerate relationships that don't feel safe, because that feeling of safety has never been the baseline. And here's the trap that I see happen, to where when trauma starts becoming more a part of the picture, it can often get mislabeled as that person is just acting more autistic. Or on the other side of things, autism can get missed because trauma, it's the headline. And in either scenario, the person doesn't get the right help because we don't have the full picture and we don't understand the mechanism behind all of it just yet. So the cycle stays alive. So now let me give you that roadmap on how to break this cycle. And a lot of these examples might seem that it's for kids or teens, but you can also apply this to adults. Let me give you 3 different things that you can literally start doing today. So number 1 is to explicitly teach What makes a good friend? So with kids or teens, I'll ask, what do you think makes a good friend? And typically what we'll do is we'll build a pretty simple definition of it, right? A friend is someone who's kind. They listen. There's a back and forth. There's mutuality to it. A friend is someone that I can feel safe with. And they also respect the answer no. They don't pressure you. They don't isolate you. They don't push you to do things that you don't want to do. And you don't have to earn basic respect from them. And so some kids, they don't learn this through osmosis. It needs to be taught explicitly. And that's not a deficit. This is just a support need. Another one is to shift the environment from correction to support. If you're a parent, meeting your child where they're at is not lowering expectations. Rather, it's choosing expectations that match their capacity and building skills without shaming them. And if you're an adult, one of the most powerful things that you can do is reduce any time that you have with someone that makes you feel unsafe, and increasing your time with anyone who's more predictable, reliable, and respectful, even if that circle of folks is really small at first. If autism and trauma are present, you want care that addresses and understands both of these things. So having a neuroaffirming therapist that can see you through the lens of autism and be able to help you and validate you through that journey of trauma. So if you've been feeling like a magnet for trauma, I want you to hear this. It doesn't mean that you're broken. A lot of the time, it means that you've been trying to survive in environments that don't fit your wiring, and trying to navigate other people that are trying to exploit that. But here's the thing, cycles can be interrupted. Once you understand the mechanisms behind it, the social naivete, the belonging needs, the self-trust that drops down, the invalidating environments. Once you understand this in the cycle, that's when you can start building a life that's safer and more workable for you. All right, so if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. Also, stick around for this one because I think that you'll like it. All right, I'll see you there. Bye.